Joab was a fearless leader and a remarkable strategist in the history of Israel. As the commander of King David's army, he was instrumental in the great victories that helped strengthen the kingdom. However, Joab was not only known for his achievements. He also had a reputation for being vindictive and shedding blood mercilessly, sometimes even disobeying David's orders. How could a man so close to the king be such a controversial figure? Why did he, expected to be a guardian of justice, end up betraying people like Abner and Amasa, who trusted him? And what led to the tragic and humiliating end of this powerful commander? We will explore these questions in this video. Stay with us until the end to fully understand the complex story of Joab, the relentless and bloodthirsty commander of Israel. Joab is remembered as one of the most prominent warriors in the history of Israel. During David's reign, he commanded the Israelite army and accumulated a series of victories that were crucial to establishing David's rule in Jerusalem. Despite being a competent and often loyal military leader, Joab had negative aspects in his personality. He was known for being vindictive and violent, acting at times unpredictably. On some occasions, he demonstrated great wisdom, but on others, his impulsive actions led him to betray the king's trust. Joab stood out during David's reign, serving as the commander of Israel's army. He was the son of Zeruiah, David's sister, making him the king's nephew. Joab, along with his brothers Abishai and Asahel, formed a trio known for their courage and military skill. The Bible frequently mentions his mother Zeruiah, but provides few details about his father, mentioning only that he was buried in Bethlehem, David's hometown. The name Joab means Yahweh is Father, reflecting the deep spiritual connection valued in Hebrew culture at the time. Joab's story in the scriptures begins to stand out during the turbulent period that marked the transfer of power from Saul to David. Joab and his brothers, Abishai and Asahel, distinguished themselves as leaders among the warriors loyal to David. They clashed with the forces of Ishbosheth, Saul's son, who fought to keep Israel's throne under his control. Ishbosheth had Abner, an experienced military strategist, as his commander. However, Abner's skill was not enough, and his army was eventually defeated. During this conflict, a significant event occurred involving Joab's family. Asahel, the youngest brother known for his agility and bravery, pursued Abner with great determination, ignoring Abner's warnings to stop. Abner, reluctant to kill the young man but pressured by the situation, ended up killing Asahel in self-defense, using the tip of his spear. This tragic incident caused deep sadness and anger in Joab's family. This incident, however, was not forgotten. Later, Joab treacherously murdered Abner to avenge the death of his brother Asahel. At that time, Abner was no longer a threat to David's reign. In fact, he had become an important ally. After leaving Ishbosheth, Saul's son, Abner recognized David as the legitimate king of a unified Israel and worked to ensure that the northern tribes accepted David's rule. This support strengthened David's power, creating an opportunity to unify the kingdom and put an end to internal conflicts. However, David's alliance with Abner provoked Joab's anger. When he returned from a military mission, Joab discovered that David had received Abner warmly and even celebrated the meeting. This rekindled Joab's desire for revenge for his brother's death and also stirred other dark feelings. Some historians believe that Joab feared losing his position as commander of the army because he saw Abner, with his experience and political skills, as a potential rival in David's unified government. For Joab, this was unacceptable. Driven by a mix of personal revenge and possible political interests, Joab began actively working to discredit Abner in David's eyes. He tried in various ways to convince the king that Abner was not trustworthy and that his actions were motivated by ambition, not sincere repentance or loyalty to the unified kingdom of Israel. Joab argued that Abner was merely pretending to support David, possibly to spy on the kingdom and gain an advantage for a potential betrayal. These insinuations were clearly intended to sow distrust in David's heart, but the king, recognizing the sincerity of the alliance proposed by Abner, was not swayed. Unable to convince David, Joab decided to act independently of the king's authority. He sent messengers to summon Abner back to Hebron, sending a friendly message that invited him to a private meeting regarding the new political alliance. Abner, believing in the sincerity of the invitation and thinking that Joab wanted to resolve their differences, returned to Hebron without hesitation. However, this meeting was actually an ambush. Hebron was known as a city of refuge, where, according to Mosaic law, someone accused of murder could seek shelter until their case was judged, being protected from acts of vengeance. Despite this, Joab disregarded these sacred laws. Upon Abner's arrival, Joab took him to an isolated place, pretending to want a private conversation. There, with the possible help of his brother Abishai, Joab murdered Abner with a fatal blow to the abdomen. When King David was informed of the assassination of Abner, he was deeply outraged and did not hide his disapproval of Joab's cruel and treacherous act. To David, Abner's death was not just a personal attack against a respected man, but also an affront to his authority as king and a stain on the honor of the kingdom of Israel. Abner had come to Hebron in peace, under the guarantee of safety offered by David himself, and his death, committed treacherously, represented a breach of trust and a disregard for the sacred laws protecting those who sought refuge. David was so furious about the incident that, in a public demonstration of repudiation, he solemnly declared that he had no involvement or responsibility for the shedding of Abner's blood. He said, "I and my kingdom are innocent before the Lord of the blood of Abner, son of Ner." 2 Samuel chapter 3, verse 28. With these words, David not only reaffirmed his moral stance, but also made it clear that Joab's act was something he would never have authorized. Outraged, David pronounced a curse upon Joab and his descendants, declaring that they would suffer severe divine punishments. The curse included a series of calamities, that there would always be among Joab's descendants someone with chronic illnesses, skin diseases, physical disabilities, hunger, those who would die in battle, or those who would live in poverty. This pronouncement by the king was not merely a display of anger, but also a symbolic act to show David's disassociation from Joab, emphasizing that Joab would have to face the consequences of his actions before God. Joab's act of killing Abner, especially since it took place in Hebron, a city of refuge, was particularly reprehensible. David deeply mourned Abner's death, considering him a valiant man. Moreover, David insisted that Joab and the entire army of Israel pay their respects during Abner's funeral, demonstrating honor and reverence. Subsequently, the Bible reveals that Joab was a talented and highly influential commander in Israel. He led David's army to great victories against nations such as Syria, Ammon, and Edom. His importance increased even further when he became the commander-in-chief of Israel's army after the conquest of Jerusalem, which was, at the time, the fortress of the Jebusites. This conquest occurred during David's reign over all the tribes of Israel, marking the beginning of a unified and strong kingdom. Joab, however, was a complex figure. He displayed a mix of virtues and flaws. On one hand, he made noble decisions and played an essential role in consolidating David's kingdom. For example, he gave all the credit to David for the conquest of Ramoth-Gilead, demonstrating humility and loyalty. He also acted as a mediator during moments of conflict, such as when he helped restore the relationship between David and his son Absalom. On the other hand, Joab was not always predictable in his actions. He did not hesitate to make questionable decisions when he deemed them necessary. Nevertheless, on certain occasions, he demonstrated concern for the good of the kingdom. One example of this was when he tried to convince David to abandon the idea of conducting a census of the people, as Joab considered it imprudent and harmful. These characteristics make Joab a remarkable figure in biblical history, both for his great military achievements and for his complex and hard-to-define personality. On the other hand, Joab had moments in his story that revealed a darker side of his personality, marked by reprehensible acts and cruel decisions. One example was the cold and calculated manner in which he avenged Abner, disregarding the reconciliation David had fostered with the former commander of Saul's army. Another significant episode was his involvement in David's sinful plan to cover up his adultery with Bathsheba. When David discovered that she was pregnant, he ordered Joab to place Uriah, Bathsheba's husband and one of his most loyal soldiers, at the front line of the battle so that he would be killed. Joab, without showing any resistance or questioning the king, executed the plan without scruples, ensuring that Uriah was abandoned at a critical point in the battle where he ultimately died. This act, beyond its cruelty, demonstrated Joab's willingness to commit morally wrong actions to satisfy David's interests. After Absalom's rebellion, Joab again stood out for his complexity. He was responsible for mediating the reconciliation between father and son, demonstrating a conciliatory and strategic side. However, when Absalom rebelled against David, Joab directly disobeyed the king's order to spare his son's life. During the battle, Absalom became caught by his hair in a tree branch, and instead of capturing him alive as David had instructed, Joab chose to kill him. He pierced Absalom, sealing his fate. Following these events, Joab was removed from his position as commander of Israel's army, a role he had held with great prominence and influence. David, dissatisfied with Joab's actions, especially the execution of Absalom in direct disobedience to his orders, decided to replace him. To take Joab's place, David appointed Amasa, a commander who had served alongside Absalom during the rebellion, but whom David forgave and brought into his circle of trust. This decision was also a political strategy by David to consolidate unity among the tribes of Israel and mitigate any lingering resentment after the civil war. Joab's removal, however, did not go unnoticed. For Joab, losing command of the army was not merely a matter of pride, but a direct threat to his position of power and influence. He watched Amasa's movements closely, waiting for the right moment to reclaim his post. This opportunity arose during the revolt of Sheba, a Benjaminite who rose against David and attempted to divide the kingdom once again. Amasa was tasked with gathering the soldiers of Judah to confront the rebellion, but he delayed longer than expected in fulfilling his mission, possibly due to a lack of experience or difficulty in mobilizing the troops quickly. This failure gave Joab the perfect pretext to act. Taking advantage of Amasa's delay, Joab took charge of the military operations. During a meeting between the two, Joab feigned cordiality, approaching Amasa as if to greet him. But, in a treacherous move, Joab stabbed Amasa in the abdomen with his sword, killing him instantly. However, Joab's final days were marked by betrayal, dishonor, and a tragic end that starkly contrasted with the glories he had achieved throughout his life. During the final moments of David's reign, Joab made a decision that would bitterly seal his fate. Although he had faithfully served alongside David for many years, his impulsive behavior and tendency to act in his own interests ultimately led him to abandon loyalty to the king. When David was old and nearing the time to pass the throne to his successor, a dispute over the succession arose. Adonijah, one of David's sons, attempted to usurp the throne, proclaiming himself king before David could formally transfer power to Solomon, the son chosen by God and by David to rule Israel. Adonijah received support from important figures in the kingdom, including the priest Abiathar and Joab, the veteran commander of the army. This alliance surprised many, as Joab, who had been so close to David, now stood against the king's will. Joab's support of Adonijah revealed both his ambition and his inability to accept changes that threatened his influence. He may have seen in Adonijah an opportunity to maintain his power and control over the army, whereas Solomon represented a new era, potentially bringing changes that could mean the end of Joab's privileged position. This choice, however, was a grave miscalculation. David, still on the throne, acted quickly to ensure the coronation of Solomon as his rightful successor. With the help of loyal allies such as the prophet Nathan, the priest Zadok, and Benaiah, the leader of the royal guard, Solomon was anointed king, securing his position as ruler of Israel. Solomon's ascension weakened Adonijah's position and left Joab in a vulnerable situation, as he had aligned himself with the losing side. When Solomon ascended the throne and began consolidating his rule, he needed to address the threats and divisions that still lingered in the kingdom, many of which were tied to David's turbulent past and to those who had acted against his directives. Joab, who had been one of Israel's key military leaders, now became a problematic and dangerous figure. His involvement in treacherous acts, such as the assassinations of Abner and Amasa, and his support for Adonijah's attempt to usurp the throne, made his position untenable in Solomon's new government. Fearing the consequences of his actions, Joab fled to Gibeon, where he sought refuge in the tabernacle, clinging to the horns of the altar. This act was an ancient symbolic practice in Israel to seek divine protection and mercy, especially by those who feared retribution for their crimes. Joab, however, did not seem repentant for his actions. His flight was more of a final effort to evade the justice of the new king. Solomon, however, was determined to fulfill the final instructions of his father, David, who had ordered that Joab be punished for his unjust bloodshed. David had made it clear that the murders of Abner, the commander of Saul's army, and Amasa, the commander David had appointed to replace Joab, were crimes that stained the house of Israel and needed to be corrected. These murders, committed treacherously and driven by vengeance and ambition, made Joab guilty of shedding innocent blood. Upon learning that Joab was at the tabernacle, Solomon sent Benaiah, the commander of his royal guard, to carry out the sentence. When Benaiah arrived at the sanctuary and ordered Joab to come out, Joab refused, declaring that he preferred to die there. In response, Benaiah returned to Solomon to confirm the king's orders. Solomon, in a firm decision, ordered that the execution be carried out right there at the altar, so that the kingdom would be cleansed of Joab's crimes. Benaiah, obeying the king's command, killed Joab in the sanctuary. This execution was not just an act of justice, but also a powerful symbol of Solomon's authority and his commitment to establishing a kingdom based on justice and obedience to God's laws. Joab, who had been a central figure during David's reign, ended his days tragically, without honor, and his death marked the end of an era. Finally, the Bible mentions other men named Joab, such as the son of Sariah, a descendant of Kenaz, and the leader of a family who returned from exile with Zerubbabel. However, none of these should be confused with Joab, the commander of Israel's army during David's time. Now write in the comments, if you already knew the story of Joab in the Bible, leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss upcoming videos. May God bless your life.